I'm talking about money you never seen, how the Incredible Hulk, so much paper I'm turning green, how green giant, I want it, I buy it. Y'all just ballers on the budget, fuck your money's on that diet. I'm laughing, you such a riot. David versus your Goliath, let my money talk for me, hear 'em.
First things first, the first thing you guys are going to need to know is how the king got his money.
How did James raise money? Okay, show your answers.
Swear that the king got money through tonnage and poundage, but what actually are they?
Well, tonnage and poundage were custom duties granted since medieval times to the English crown by Parliament. Tonnage was a fixed subsidies on each ton, in brackets cask, of wine imported, and poundage was an proportional tax on all imported and exported goods. Though of separate origin, they were granted together from 1373 and were used for the protection of trade at sea. From 1414, they were customly granted to each successive
Some
king.
goods to bring to the country.
Oh, right. These your goods?
Yes, they are.
Right. This one looks quite light. I think that should be about £5, please.
There you go.
Brilliant, sir. And this one? Ooh, this one looks a bit heavier. £10, please, sir. Oh, and this one. Ooh, you better reach deep in your pockets. £40, please, sir.
There you go.
Perfect.
Excellent.
However, when it came to Charles, tonnage and poundage was only voted for 1 year, because not all the MPs were there to vote.
Because of the plague. And subsidies were equally granted by Parliament, and there were a fixed sum given by Parliament to the English crown. Note, it was the use of Parliament which refused Charles the right to collect tonnage and poundage legally for his lifetime.
Round 2. How did James I raise money? Show your answers.
Impositions. Wardship.
Impositions were a tax being put on all goods going into the country. After the Bates case, which we'll mention later,
wardship?
King James was able to raise these dramatically, which is another issue with Parliament.
Wardship was a feudal right that the king had. When a young person or minor inherited land, what happened was the king would take often and cream off the profits until he came of age. It was a very profitable business, and the Court of Wards became a significant part of the king's patronage.
Round 3. How did James raise money? Show your answers.
Monopolies.
Purveyance.
Yeah.
I've been a loyal supporter of yours for several years now. I think it's about time.
And I appreciate it.
But I think it's about time you rewarded me to show your appreciation.
I'm not really in the financial situation to do that.
I've heard about people get monopolies. Where's my monopoly?
What monopoly do you
I
want?
want a monopoly on fairground rides.
Okay.
So now he's got the
Done deal.
monopoly for fairground rides, only he can sell them. So the board can't. This means that since it's a captive market, prices will soar, and monopolies will become particularly unpopular.
Wait! You can't buy that. I've got a monopoly on fairground rides.
Prevent reduced expenditure of Buckingham Palace. How? Because it enabled the Crown to buy products at a mate's rate. Great for the king, not so great for the
Round
traders,
4.
who made a
How did
lot
James
of
raise
MPs,
money?
who suffered because they didn't make any profit from the king.
Show your answers.
Custom farmers.
Forced loans.
Elizabeth I and Lord Burnley, Cecil's father, weren't really that good at squeezing out all the money they could from the collection of custom duties. For instance, they failed to increase custom duties along with inflation, and also failed to solve the issue of heavy corruption in the collection of custom duties. So, what did they do? They decided to privatise the collection of custom duties by creating custom farmers. All you had to do was pay a little lease, and that meant you could make a lot of dollar. This increased efficiency meant that the king got roughly 10% more money from custom duties. But it was not the only way that the king got money, as you well know. Forced loans were also a way of the king getting money. And, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. An example of a forced loan being used is 1627. So, I wouldn't really mention it on James's side of the course, but when it gets to Charles, great plan.
When James inherited the throne, the crown debt stood at roughly £400,000. However, once you consider the fact that the crown was owed £300,000 in taxes, historians say that, well, the books were roughly even. However, before you criticise James, who managed to topple the books, you must consider 3 factors. Firstly, you must consider the fact that he had a family to sustain, and if you are the royal family, that doesn't come cheap.
Girlfriend likes to shop a lot, but she don't really like hip-hop a lot. But she really likes what hip-hop has got me, that's got her hopping from shop to shop. She listens to pop a lot, cause it's popular and it's popping off. And even though they all talk poppycock, she don't give a toss as long as she's got the song. Okay, I'll tag along, cause if I don't go, she'll start banging on. If I don't go, I'll get dragged along into Ann Summers to pick out a matching from. So I go with her just to get it over with it. I take my iPod so it could be over quick. She buys clothes and more clothes until the store closes, and she don't even know if they fit.
Secondly, you must consider the fact that Queen Elizabeth I had sold a lot of crown lands, meaning that James got significant.
Oh dear, can you just buy some land off me, please? I really need the money.
Yeah, I'll buy that one, and that one for $2,000? £1,000.
2,000? What do you think I am? 1,100?
No, 1,000. Your debt's spiraling out of control. You need this money. We both know it. 1,000 or no deal.
Okay. If we must. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And thirdly, you must consider the fact that she failed to increase taxes to coincide with inflation, meaning that in real money terms, the king was getting less.
Relative to Yagoda and Yezov, he may well have appeared to live a moderate life, but to the heavily religious political nation, he was perceived negatively, and shit soon went down. He didn't like the fact he spent lots of money hunting.
James wasted money like water. He spent an especially large amount of money on patronage for Scottish nobles. This further angered Parliament due to their xenophobia.
Free! Do you want money? Money!
Add to the fact that King James spent thousands upon thousands on jewellery. Relationships deteriorated a little more in the Shirley's case of 1604. Basically, an MP had a debt, and in order to pay the debt, he was arrested and sent to the Fleet Prison. And MPs considered this evasion of one of their fundamental rights. And began to speak out against the king. Eventually, Shirley was released, but the point was still made. They did not want their fundamental rights being tampered with by a Scottish king.
Welcome to England. Are those currents?
Yes, they are.
Well, I'm afraid you're going to have to pay an imposition on that. It's been said.
Well, I'm not paying any imposition tax.
It comes from the
I'll take you to court over this.
Will you?
I will. Order! I pronounce thee guilty! Damn it!
Yes! So, if I'm allowed to put impositions on currents, why don't I introduce some more in the Book of Rates? 1608, plan!
James's and Parliament's relationship was spiraling out of control. It looked like everything was soon to explode.
Oh my god, so slow. Oh, and it's skanking. Oh, I can't even put it on. Oh, it's freezing. There was light at the end of the tunnel for James's financial situation though. The great contract looked like it would resolve the issues for both parties. Oh. How fly do I look? Action.
The Great Contract of 1610 was proposed by Robert Cecil. The scheme had two aims. The first was to allow James to pay off all royal debt. The royal debt currently stood at £300,000, 150,000 of which was needed for the Royal Navy, and another 150,000 would be needed for a contingency fund. The second aim was to allow James to live in a manner that befitted a King of England. He would require £200,000 a year to enable him to live a suitable lifestyle. In return, James would give up 10 feudal rights, which had been an issue for Parliament for many years, for example, purveyance and impositions, which we mentioned earlier.
Although the Great Contract did eventually fail and result in the demise of Robert Cecil, it looked like the Great Contract was going to be a miracle. It was going to solve the issues both parties had with each other. But then, Parliament went on holiday, and both parties began to get their doubts and question whether or not the Great Contract was the way to go about it. Parliament began to question how they would get the colossal sum of £200,000 per annum, and also whether or not it would affect the relationship between the King and his Parliament. Would it mean they wouldn't call it as much as Whitelocke argued, because the greatest use of Parliament was the supply of money? Parliament weren't the only people with doubts though. The King
Faceplant off.
began to doubt whether or not it was actually worth losing all the power and patronage system which came with the feudal rights he was going to lose. Julius Caesar, one of his great advisors, argued that it wasn't really that good a deal. He was only making £85,000 per annum, and that wasn't even going to increase with inflation. As a direct result of the failure of the Great Contract, Robert Cecil fell from prominence. Parliament was dissolved, and the King ruled solo until 1621, except for the Short Ed-led Parliament, which failed to pass any legislation and grant any subsidies. It reflected the complicated relationship the King had with Parliament. Now that the King couldn't rely on money in the form of subsidies, fill his pockets, he came up with new methods, one of which was the selling of titles. This earned him over £600,000. This cheeky chappie is Thomas Howard, i.e. the Earl of Suffolk. When he became Lord Treasurer after the death of Robert Cecil, he was very bad for the financial situation of the Crown, because he was heavily corrupt. For instance, he built the largest private house in England, Audley End House, which King James described as too large for a king, but it might do for a Lord Treasurer. So, what have we learnt so far? Well, we've learnt that it became an uphill battle for James to balance his books. A battle which created a turbulent relationship with Parliament. Although they both tried to resolve in the Great Contract, they failed, and things went downhill even more after the death of Robert Cecil and the rise of Thomas Howard. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, the Cockayne Project came
along. What was the Cockayne Project of 1615 to 1617? Well, it was an idea proposed by one of the friends of the Howard faction, Alderman Cockayne, who was a merchant in the City of London. The idea, in a nutshell, was that England should go all the way and export finished cloth as opposed to half-finished cloth. Cockayne oiled the wheels by offering the king £10,000, and they set off full steam ahead. It soon became apparent, however, that the king's merchant adventurers, which replaced merchant adventurers, which had previously owned the monopoly, lacked both the contacts and capital to do the job properly. And when merchant adventurers repurchased the monopoly, that it had destroyed the cloth trade and been a massive cock-up. In fact, exports to Northern Europe never, I say never, reached pre-1914 levels. And it also affected the relationship between the king and the City of London, which meant no longer could the king rely on the city for money, and no longer could the city rely on the king for support.
In 1618, King James became aware of Suffolk's misconduct, and both him and his wife were imprisoned for embezzlement.
In 1621, this commission was replaced by an able minister, Lionel Cranfield, who became Earl of Middlesex in 1622.
So, who was Lionel Cranfield? Well, Lionel Cranfield was a lad. Why? Because he was undoubtedly the most able financial minister King James had during the entire of his reign. Why was he so good, you might ask? Well, let's look at the cold, hard facts. In 1613, he became head of customs in England, and 2 years later, he managed to increase his output by £30,000. Not bad, hey? And then, when you consider the fact he also managed to save the crown £20,000 by placing an emphasis on paying in cash as a means of obtaining discounts, he really starts to stack up a good CV, hey? He didn't stop there, though. In 1619, upon becoming Master of the Court of Wards, he significantly managed to increase its efficiency and output, to such an extent that by his impeachment in 1624, he managed to increase its output by 25%. Did I just say impeachment? Yes, I did. Why was he impeached? He seemed so good. Well, he was almost too good. The fact that he increased the cost to bring goods into the country made him unpopular with merchants. The fact that he increased war chip charges made him unpopular with the gentry. And the blocking of patronage as a means of reducing expenditure of the crown made him unpopular with almost everybody. There was another big reason, though, why he fell out with Buckingham, who had helped made his rise to prominence so swift. And this was because
He opposed the idea of war with Spain because he didn't believe England could afford it. And, as Lord High Treasurer, it was kind of his job to make sure that the country didn't go down into economic turmoil. Parliament also disliked the fact that he was so good because they feared that he might give the crown financial independence. And, as we mentioned in the Great Contract, they definitely didn't want that because they believed that one of the greatest reasons for calling Parliament was not to discuss topical issues or pass new laws, but for the supply of money in the form of subsidies.
The final significant thing worth mentioning about King James and money are the appropriation clauses put on the subsidy of £300,000 granted by Parliament in 1624. The appropriation clauses meant that no longer did the king have total control over the money granted to him, but instead a commission was assembled to oversee how his money was spent, and this meant that the king lost control, power, and was therefore a significant thing. The impermanence of life caught up with the Scottish king on the 27th of March in 1625. He died after a violent attack of dysentery, and his reign came to an end.